The recap show. It's the recap show. It's time to go for the recap show. It's the recap show. It's the recap show. It's time for some Dungeons and Dragons and luncheons and disorganized play for you and me. Da 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 da. Hey everyone. Wow. Welcome to my inner sanctum. You're getting an exclusive first look at my unkempt hair and my very crowded office. Things are a little hectic today at Nerdcore HQ. The dog was at the vet, is still at the vet, and I've got a callback to get to, and I've been working on updating some of the materials that we used last night in the game so that those of you who are Patreon backers can all share and enjoy those things. So, yes, so the good news right off the bat is that he is okay. He had some, you know how dogs are when they get old and they have teeth. Their teeth go a little bad. So we were thinking maybe he was going to lose 3 teeth, and they only took 1 tooth. And everything else looks pretty good. So they did a teeth cleaning, and they left the rest of his teeth in. So that's good news. That's good news on all fronts. So he is out of surgery and is in the recovery, and he'll be home later this afternoon. So that's you know, other than he didn't need to have any teeth out, that's the best possible outcome. So, hi everyone, welcome aboard. Thanks so much for joining me. Do I have a hat in here I can put on? Because I look like a mess. Because I just rolled out of bed this morning and then took the dog to the vet. So, this isn't my best angle. Anyway, so, yes, Luigi will be back in the studio with us later. Probably next week, next Tuesday. I'm sure I'll have him along. So, in the meantime, we've got a few topics to talk about last night's game. I thought it went fine. Just, you know, to give you the high level overview, right? I thought it was one of those nights where you realize that the players are playing the game and the DM is facilitating that, right? Like, you're playing along. It was very much, for me, it was an insightful night of, I think I can turn my phone off since the vet called. Casual chaos. Yeah, welcome to my world today. That's exactly right. Anyway, so that's I kind of felt like, okay, well, while I'm setting things up, you guys kind of steer the boat a little bit, and then they steered the boat in some ways that I didn't really expect them to. I was surprised at, right? So the game went a little bit differently than I expected to. We're going to talk about that. So today's topics. Tactical combat or not so tactical combat. Then we're going to revisit group effort in the tech tree. So if you tuned in last night and stuck to the bitter end and weren't watching hockey like my wife, although I don't blame you because it was a great game. Today we're going to talk about, you saw the tech tree in action, the tech tree that I created for them. The system that we talked about on Tuesday actually got deployed because they found some technological items for the first time that they decided to explore them, right? And then finally we're going to talk about plot threads or plot shreds. That's kind of related to our first topic, but that's fine, right? So that's what we've got on deck today. I can't go too late because I do have a callback that I have to get to this afternoon. That's why we're having lunch together. I don't have a sandwich or any snacks, but I do have this delicious Diet Dr. Pepper. That's refreshing. So, tactical combat. This is a little bit of what I was talking about, where I was surprised at how the session went, right? If we look at how events were set up last night, and I will tell you, just by way of background, that I spent a lot of my time, the vast majority of my time yesterday, working on getting the tech tree presentable and putting in the, getting it graphically pleasing and making sure that I liked the system so that it was usable on stream last night. I had ideas about how it was going to work, but I hadn't had it all exactly nailed down. And yesterday I spent most of the day nailing that down. That means I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about how I wanted to present the opening of last night's session. I didn't think a lot about what the challenges and motivations were going to be, right? So that's why things got off to kind of this weird start where I explained to them, okay, well, there's still robots patrolling around. We had a fun scene with the healing with Klaus and whatnot. I thought that was really interesting, and the the saving throws that Grayson had to make because he had gotten the anti-God's Fire injection. I thought that was interesting. So that was a fun little role-playing scene with Klaus there and administering the healing, and I'm glad that chat unlocked that because that was a fun scene. It was far more interesting than they hole up in some abandoned quarters and hope that no random encounters, right? So I did think it, yeah, I agree with BSB Care. I thought it was interesting that that he felt like he needed to give Klaus his arm back. Clunk. That was such a fun moment, right? Just here you go. Yeah. Can we have one for the road? Yes. There you go. So that was a fun scene. It didn't necessarily. I feel like, yeah, it filled in some time, but it also. I think it was also a fun interaction of like, okay, well, here's some technological creatures that are going to interact with you in a very kind of like cyberpunky kind of way, and also like demonstrate some goodwill on the part of the previous AI, right? And keep playing on this theme of this guy's invisible, but they can hear him and whatnot. So it certainly helped kind of like build the flavor of the environment, and I think it was just like a successful role playing scene apart from fulfilling its purpose of get the characters healed and give them a long rest, right? Uh, it's a fun and interesting shortcut to do it that way. And like I said, I'm glad that chat unlocked that. But also, it was an opportunity to have a little bit of let's interact with this weird future tech kind of thing that's going on. So it could have just been a shorthand, like quick hand wave it and get it over with, and let's get into the action. And it did certainly like help square things up for like, okay, what am I going to present next? But I thought it was also, for me anyhow, hopefully watching it, it was also a short and engaging encounter. And it goes to show that not every single encounter has to have like danger and threat and high stakes, right? It's a nice little grace note, a little palate cleanser of like, okay, we just had this big exhausting fight. What's going to happen next? What do we do? And then we have this kind of like, oh, let's pause and kind of like indulge in a little bit of goofy role playing and then move on. So that's it was that was worthwhile in terms of tone and pacing to play out that scene the way that we played it out. So I didn't feel really like I was tap dancing for time, like, oh, I'm trying to put off what's going to happen next. I didn't necessarily feel like that. It certainly filled part of that function, but that wasn't the intent. And I think I can tell, and I think the audience can tell when I'm trying to dance around what's going to happen next, right? So that was a perfectly fine encounter, and I thought it was worthwhile and fun. But I wasn't, as I said, I wasn't sure how to present this next section of the core, and there were a couple different things that happened that were interesting to me, right? So first of all, I present them with the map and say, well, it looks like this thing is a square and the hallways go around and connect, and there's other hallways that go off in different directions, right? And then the second thing I said was that there's a robot patrolling nearby. Now, this is where what you expect as the DM doesn't necessarily intersect with what happens at the table. Because when I presented that, I thought, okay, well, they're going to walk around the middle of this thing and see what it looks like. And I even said at one point, right, there's a single door on this wall, but it looks like this core complex is fairly big, right? And maybe I kind of was hinting at maybe there's other ways in or whatever. No interest in exploring that or anything like that. It's like let's go to the one door that we see in front of us. Let's go that place. It was very A to B. So they didn't explore around the complex. And they have a huge advantage in that Grayson, at least right now, is invisible, right? So he could just walk around that area and scope it out and come back and go, oh, okay, well, here's what's going on. So they didn't do that. And then they didn't do anything about the robots patrolling at all, right? And then they saw 3 robots, and the door opens and they saw 3 robots, and they didn't really do anything about they chased them off, but then they got in the room and they immediately started dicking around without securing the entrance in any way, shape, or form. So I talk about tactical combat. Like I look at this map, and maybe it's just the old school gamer in me, and I go, okay, well, we're gonna want to reconnoiter the area. We're going to want to take care of any lone scouts that are out patrolling around, and then we're going to want to create a distraction, infiltrate the place, and secure whatever entrances and exits we need to, right? That's not this group, right? That's just the way it is. Like they are kind of the kick in the doors, kind of chaos kings and queens. Let's barge on in, start knocking down walls and opening drawers, and we'll shoot anybody who comes and starts causing trouble. So that was an insightful moment for me, right? Because my natural play style is let's kind of play in a logical, let's minimize risk, right? It comes from that old AD&D tradition of you never know what's going to kill you, so let's minimize our risk. Let's keep our hit points. Let's keep our spell. Let's try and gain tactical advantage. Just wring tactical advantage out of every situation that we can. And that's not this group. So that means I have to kind of orient my mindset more around what kind of throwing marbles at the wall kind of approach they're going to take when I set up a situation, because they're not going to necessarily take the most tactically advantageous route. They're going to follow whatever is shiniest and most interesting. And as a DM, you can use that as a tool to punish them. You can exploit that if you want. But I think you need to be careful about that, because your players are not going to be happy about it, right? They're not. They're going to feel like you're beating up on them for playing the way that they think is fun, right? So that's the tricky. That was one of the realizations last night that I had, which was I'm like, you guys have really screwed this up. But it's the difference between my play style, what I would do in their shoes, and their play style. And then the other part of it that you have to keep in mind is it's also an issue of I'm the DM and I have all of the notes in front of me, so I know what the hazards and the dangers are. I know they're going into a room that doesn't have any immediate exits unless they have the right key cards. And if they don't have the right key cards, they can't get out. They're trapped in there. They're walking into literally like a box canyon, right? I know that. They don't know that. It's a huge ship with this, big labyrinthine corridors and enormous rooms and weird features and pipes and tanks and stuff like that. They don't know that. So some of it is like, because you see the whole scope of the module as the DM, you go, well, that was really stupid. But they don't see as much difference in choice because they only have this much information and you have all of this, right? BSB Care asks, do I think that they didn't scout and whatnot because it was theater of the mind, or would this would have happened if they had a map or something like that with them? Well, they had a map. They had a map with them, and I even put the map on the table, right? Like I showed them the core area and explained, oh, it looks like you're here and it goes around. Now, I've sort of dismissed, like, well, this isn't really to scale, it's not very accurate, so maybe they felt like it was a lot bigger and more impenetrable than maybe it was. But they had a reasonably accurate map, at least good enough for their purposes, to help inform how they wanted to approach this thing. You know, the problem is that they have a lack of information, so all choices are equally valid because none of them offers a particular advantage over the other. It's all just go through door A that's unknown, door B that's unknown, door C that's unknown, or door D that's unknown. So why should we walk around the building to the quote-unquote back side when that poses just as much potential threat or reward as any other door in the area, right? Um, And as Estelle Castillo points out, right, the scope of the original module was to punish the PCs as much as you can and see if they can escape the deadly spaceship and aliens, as opposed to let's create an engaging and interesting story and a narrative arc with an obstacle that they need to overcome and be rewarded for. So we're certainly adapting this thing to suit a purpose that it was not originally intended for. That's the challenge. That's the exciting part of it. And I think so far it's paid off in some interesting ways, or at least set up some interesting potential. Right? I think there's still a ways to go with that, but I'm fairly happy with the ideas that are currently in play. All right. So that's I named it tactical combat. I wanted to talk about tactical. It was really a topic of playstyle, right? And the players are going to show you their playstyle, and rather than judging them for that, I would encourage you to embrace it and accept it and try and decide, okay, why are they making these decisions? Is there something in the way that I'm presenting it, which we just talked about, or is there just something in their particular play style? They're a bunch of loose cannons, right? I mean, I think that's certainly a principle that's like initiated by Avril's character, but that's also like the rest of the group likes to go along with that style. They're okay with that because it makes things happen, right? You know, the advantage to having a loose cannon in your party is they make things happen, and the rest of the party kind of gets to ride both sides of that high in terms of, oh, now I get to save their bacon, but also like, oh, I told you so. I told you. Oh, well, here we go again. Oh, I told you so. Oh, here we go again. You know, you get to kind of have your cake and eat it too when you're the quote unquote more cautious character and somebody else is playing the loose cannon. So those are two considerations that I think, you know, were revealed by the way that things unfolded last night. And that's just an insight that I had that I don't think I could really express on stream, but you know, if you go back and watch it, I think you'll see me going like, why are you doing this? When you have that moment, you have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't be so judgy. So yeah. Yeah, this adventure was definitely a way for the DM to get rid of high-level characters, depending upon how much tech you armed your froggy moth with. So, we're going to flip over to a little mode that I call show and tell time, because we're going to talk about group effort and the tech tree. So we had this was sort of two topics combined into one. I talked about it on Tuesday in terms of everybody wants to roll and find out, right? That's a very common situation that comes up in DMing, and I don't think the current rules handle it in a way that's a satisfying play experience for everyone, right? Classic example being searching. Okay, I searched the room. Or making a perception check. Okay, make a perception check. Well, I want to make one too. And the current rules are basically like, oh, okay, well, you're helping, so that person gets advantage. But that takes the dice rolling out of the other player. And they want to play. They want to roll the dice. They want to apply their bonuses. They want to have the same chance of success as the other people. Hey, everyone. Welcome aboard. Mox Eric. Glad to see you. So glad to see everyone in the chat here loading up. Maybe noon is a better time. Who knows? I think we're going to stick with 2. But so I've created a system we saw last night to try and address that. You know, we talked about it on Tuesday where everybody sort of has a role in helping, whether it's disarming a trap or in this case, figuring out what a technological item does, which is actually just a form of disarming a trap, right? Because if you figure it out, if you disarm the trap, you learn how to, you basically get a magic item, right? And if you don't disarm the trap, it goes off in your hand and you shoot somebody with a laser pistol or whatever it is. So yeah, you should watch the end of last night's episode to see how this played out. But I'm going to talk about it a little bit today. So let's flip over to show and tell time. Now this file is available to anyone who's a Patreon backer. It's in the Patreon folder right now, and this is the tech tree. I don't have a picture of what the original tech tree looks like. I should honestly let me screen cap one quick and pull it in because it's gonna be worth it to compare the two. So let me just, the advantage to me being at my no, I don't want that one. I don't want that one. Book 2? Expedition to the Barrier Peaks? Nope. Is it that one? No, it's not that one. Is it that one? Yeah, I guess it is. Maybe. Let me see. No, it's not. Okay. Where's the first one? Oh boy. Where did I put it? Where are my post-it notes? Where's Farquaad to make fun of me? That's not it. Guess what? I will just pull it open in my folder here. I know that this is I know this is a little bit boring, sorry. But I think it's going to be worth it to figure it out. Book 1, here we go. Alright, yes, this. Okay, let me just do a screen cap of this and then I'll pull it in and we can compare the two. Meanwhile, you can look at the tech tree and see whether you like it or not. Where's my tools? Edit, tools. Here we go. Alright. I'm going to pull in the most complicated one I can. Alright. Let's dump that in a file. Oh, BSBK, even you know what the quotes are now. That's not fair. This is pretty small, but I don't care. Alright. Almost done moving files, everybody. Isn't that exciting? Yes. I do want to show you the comparison between the two. All right, let me just pull in this file here. Add in. Browse. Scroll down. There it is. Open. Okay. All right, so let me get this one out of the way. All right, so this. Let me scale this up. We'll see how well it scales. So this is the original, right? Perfect. Great. Are you the one who made that quote? Oh boy, I thought that was Flackwad. BSB Care says, yeah, your favorite Uncle Dave points out, when we all know if the other players are not doing anything, you lose their attention, and that leads you into troubled territory. I don't allow proficiency check, but these are straight up ability check rolls, right? All right, so this is the original flowchart of how technology works if you're trying to figure out some sort of lethal item, right? And they have 4 different charts of this stuff and whatever, for whether it's complex or simple and lethal or non-lethal or whatever it is. So if you're trying to figure out how a fire extinguisher works, it's not going to blow up on you. Nah. Maybe it should. All right. As I've discussed before, here's the problem with this, is that this was designed for the DM to use, and the players don't really see this, and they don't understand where they're at in the chart. There's no description of what the difference between a circle and a triangle is. There's no change of state between those various rolls. Nobody knows what the stakes are. They don't know how close they are to actually to either danger or to figuring the item out. It's a very opaque minigame that the DM just plays behind the screen, and you call for the players to make a bunch of rolls that they don't understand what they're for or how close they are to success or failure, right? So that's the issue that I have with what's presented. Now, it's not to like bag on the module, because this was written in 1980 or whatever, 78. This was not, this was, state of the art for the time, right? Well, here we are, whatever, 30, 40 years later, let's get up to speed with a different state of the art. So, guess what? My mouse doesn't work on the screen. It only works on the screen. So this is my take on this thing, right? So if you watched last night, you can see this thing deployed, and this is actually a little bit revised from what we used last night. And also a lot prettier, because I spent the morning making this pretty. So there's 2 tracks you can go down. You can either try and figure it out, that's the intelligence track, or you can try and fiddle with it, that's the dexterity track, right? That's the basic idea. And so you go down and you make a series of checks, and if you succeed, you continue down your chosen track, and if you fail, then you start to bounce around over to the other track. So if you can't figure it out and you get stymied, then you have to fiddle with it, right? Well, if you fiddle with it and you're successful, then you may bounce back into the intelligence track, like, oh, okay, now. So it's this dance. It's either you can succeed at one thing the whole time, or if the dice treat you poorly, then you have to kind of do this dance back and forth of intelligent, right? Yeah, so it should be a green arrow, but yeah, that's maybe the colors aren't so great. I'm not sure. At any rate, so that's the idea. The other idea here is that if you fail twice, something bad happens, right? You're basically out, right? So your first die roll doesn't kill you, but your second one does. But you literally like put your miniature on the board if you want to, and march them down through the flowchart. And I shared this with the players last night. They saw it, right? They played on the map. And they knew, oh, okay, well, this next one is going to be tough. So they could start planning a strategy. And actually, at one point, you saw Garav go, you know what? I think I actually want to fail this intelligence check, because that will bring me back over to dexterity and have a much better chance of making a dexterity check than I do of making another intelligence check. Now, BSB Care asked, do you allow rerolls? Anything that would be allowed in our Iron Keep game in terms of play would be allowed, right? So if they had, like last night at the end, they had bumps, they applied their bumps. If they wanted to use rerolls, they could use rerolls, etc. What I might do is, if you get to an end result that fails you out of the tech tree, if you get far enough, maybe say you get to like the second, to that second set of fail conditions, I would say, okay, you get inspiration the next time that you go through this tree, right? You can use your inspiration one time to give yourself advantage on this thing. Arguably, if they would come up with something that I might consider giving them, advantage for anyhow, maybe I would apply it. But yeah, why not? So here's the second part of this, which is not actually on I don't have a scan of it yet, and I'm not really happy with the way that it looks. So I'll maybe fidget with it. But on this piece of paper, we have three other roles. We have the hands-on helper, we have the advisor, and we have the kibitzer. And we talked about this on Tuesday, right? And so the advisor makes intelligence-based checks, the kibitzer makes wisdom-based checks, and the hands-on helper has to flip. What that means is you can start with either intelligence or dexterity, but then you have to flip back and forth. You can't use the same one twice in a row. So if I start with dex, then this has to be an intelligence check, and then this becomes a dex check, etc., 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 right? So that's the way that works. I have to flip back and forth. I can start with intelligence if I want, if I'm good at that, but then this is a dex check, this is an intelligence check, this is a dex check. You can kind of customize for whatever roles your party has, right? So Havana played the hands-on helper last night because she has okay intelligence, but she has really good dexterity. So she was able to kind of min-max. I'm going to make this 14 and this 16 and this 14. I'm going to make those dexterity checks because I have a pretty good chance of making those. The 10 and the 10, I have an okay intelligence. Let's just hope I make those, right? And Eric played the advisor. He was making intelligence checks or not making intelligence checks, as the case may be. And then Megan was the kibitzer. She's sort of like your role in that position is to kind of sit at the sidelines and go with your gut and go, that doesn't feel right, guys. That doesn't make sense. No, why don't you turn it around or whatever. So that's the second part of the system that's not on here. But the way that the system works is if those characters, those helper people, roll to help whoever's on our tech tree, right? And if they make the DC that's listed on that step of the process, they add a point of insight. Okay, that's basically a +1 that the person on the tech tree can use whenever they want. If they don't make it, if they fail, if they get lower than the DC, then they generate a point of confusion. In other words, their advice isn't actually helpful. And you can apply as much or as little insight or confusion as you go through this tech tree as you want, but at the end, at the very last step, anything that's left all gets dumped onto that roll, right? So there is kind of a way to game the system where if you wanted to try and deliberately fail a roll, you're going to load up a bunch of confusion and try and fail it out. And then that gives you an advantage of having a bunch of insight, hopefully, to apply to give you a bonus on the roll as you come out the back end, right? So this is really designed as its own mini game, but the beauty of it is the players understand what's going on. They can see what the outcomes are and they can plan a strategy, and everyone's involved and engaged in generating either insight or confusion to help whoever's handling the technology go through this thing step by step, right? So overall, I like the system. I think maybe the main tweak that I would make to it is, as we saw last night, is it's pretty tough, right? It's so finely balanced that you generate about the same amount of insight and confusion. So those don't give you a huge swing either way. And then the DCs were just a little too high. So in this version, I did actually tone the DCs down. I took everything down by 2 points, right? So I think it's a little more achievable now. So rather than that DC 18, I tried to build it up so there's kind of like a natural progression of like an easy roll, and then you got to go over a hump, and then an easy roll, and you got to go over a hump, right? And then the final roll is, of course, the hardest because you're really on the verge of like having that insight of breaking through and getting to it. Now, like I said, you might say, okay, the next time you go through it, I'm going to give you inspiration because you already have kind of a fundamental understanding of how this thing works. The other thing that I want to explain, which we really didn't get to, is at the very bottom of this thing, I kind of wish that, I don't know that OBS has a pointer system, but at the very bottom of this thing, there's actually 2 bonus things that you could go for, right? There's the flip 14 and the flip 16, and what that is you've figured out how to use the item. You can actually go for a little bonus juice and either like figure out how to like juice some extra charges out of it, or figure out some sort of tech synergy that you could, some purpose that you could use beyond what it's obviously used for, right? So you could gain greater insight or greater applicability if you're willing to take one more, like roll the dice one more time, right? But you have to flip to whatever you didn't use to make the successful insight check, right? So if you used int, you have to flip over to dex, but you can pick, do I want to make a dex 14 or do I want to make a dex 16? It's not a huge difference, but for most characters, it's going to make a huge difference, right? Um, yeah, you could, let's see, you could change this from item to item. I'm going to try and make a version available to our Patreon backers that doesn't have the numbers filled in, right? And that shouldn't be too difficult to do. So then you could add your own numbers if you wanted to tweak it yourself, if your group is higher or lower level. I don't know. You know, the tricky thing is that most of these DCs are really just depend upon, you're going to roll, half the time you're going to roll a 10 or lower, and half the time you're going to roll 11 or higher on your D20, right? So even a DC 10, if you have a +2, you're still failing out, 40% of the time or something like that. Yeah, you have a couple different options in terms of if an item is more complex, you could tweak a couple different things. You could say, all right, you start the game, this item is more complex. You start the game with 4 confusion because this item is more complex. Or roll 2d6, that's how many confusion are on the board. Or I don't know, you could tweak. Right now it assumes you start with 0 insight and 0 confusion, right? But rather than tweaking the DCs, which of course requires you to print up a whole new sheet or whatever, why not make the PCs tweak the DCs by adding some confusion to the mix? This is a computer, it's incredibly difficult to figure out. You start with 6 confusion. Now, you could also conversely make things easier by saying, all right, you start with 4 insight right out of the bat. Or you could tweak the system where, now I did say last night, if you roll a natural 1, you add 2 confusion. If you roll a natural 20, you add 2 insight. You could change that proportion, right, of how much insight you get when you make it. So you could say, okay, you generate 2 insight when you make your checks, you only generate 1 confusion when you fail them, right? So that's one way that you could make this system adjust on the fly to what the players do. The problem is if you put a bunch of insight and a bunch of confusion on the table, you might want to consider limiting how much they can apply at any one given time before they get to the final, right? Because it could lead to that trap of, look, let's dump all of our confusion on that first roll, and then use our insight advantage to get us over the hump on the next one. You might also make a rule that if the confusion wipes out whatever your check was, or if your confusion fails to hit a certain threshold, it automatically fails you out, right? So for instance, if you apply 6 confusion and you only roll a 6, if your result is 0 or whatever, then you fail out. Yeah, it's not necessarily super easy to balance, right? It depends upon what level of success that you want. Now, keep in mind that some of the outcomes aren't necessarily full failures, right? So like off of the last branch there, you see that use the item with disadvantage. And we saw that last night and the second time around when they came through and tried to figure out what the laser gauntlet was for. Okay, you figured out this is a laser gauntlet, but you haven't figured out exactly how to use it, and you're going to use it with disadvantage at this point. Maybe after a while of using it, that will go away. But you have determined the purpose of this item and how it functions, and you can use it in a relatively safe manner, but you have disadvantage with it because you're not proficient in it. So that is a failure off of the int side of the thing. That isn't actually terrible. The other one is drain it of all but 1 charge. Well, maybe, I don't know. I think we could probably tweak that outcome so that it's also somewhat friendlier. You could use the item. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I would tweak that off the top of my head. But let me think about it. Yeah. Does it need a little bit of polish, maybe, probably. I think for our purposes, it kind of let's keep playing with it and see what happens with it. I do think lowering the DCs definitely helps, and I'm planning to do that with the helper rules too. So it's not as it generates right now. It generates a lot of confusion, and I think we should mostly punish players for rolling really low. Now, we could also apply, if we wanted to make it more complex, we could apply a band to it where it's like, if you failed by less than 5, but you succeed, if you failed by less than 3, but you also succeeded by less than 3, if you're in that kind of sweet spot, your advice isn't really helpful. It doesn't generate one thing one way or the other. But if you got more than 3 over, you generate a point of insight. If you got more than 3 under, then you generate a point of confusion. So, yeah, we could have it where on the dexterity side that it turns into a single use item. I do like that idea that BSB Care suggested here, that it now becomes a single use item. That's a cool outcome. You get to use it one time and then it's burnt out. Okay, I like that. So I may go in and change that. Not today, but I think I may go in and change that, because having it drained of all but one charge doesn't quite convey the same circumstance, right? So this is something that's been kicking around in my head. I've had a sketch for this thing and the idea for this thing for a while, and I think it's got a solid concept behind it, and maybe it needs a little more use, but I think it's pretty well like ready to kind of be deployed in the game and polished in the game. And the thing is, this mini game now addresses a whole bunch of other situations that we're going to crop up throughout the course of the adventure, right? So if they want to hack the computer, if they want to fix the AI or the info stream or whatever it is, we can have them kind of work their way down this tech tree and adjust this tech tree if need be to be a custom thing, right? But it's a good basic framework of 2 fails bails you out, but everyone gets to contribute to the group effort. So yeah, I like the idea of the one thing becoming a one-shot item. That is that. Again, this mouse that I have over on this side of my desk doesn't do anything on my laptop. I'm sitting at my computer and then my laptop is in front of my computer. I have a lot of computers, guys. I'm a nerd, so I don't know if you know. All right. So then the last thing that I want to address is a topic, like I said, is kind of harkening back to our first topic, plot threads or plot shreds. I think it became very clear last night that the party doesn't actually know what they're doing, right? And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. It is a problem within the adventure and within the game, but it is not necessarily their fault, or I don't mean that in like a cruel. Like I said, I don't mean that in a pejorative way. They don't actually know what their goal and their motivation is, right? They get this thing, let's find the God's fire, and now they're really fumbling for how do we do that. So let's back up. That became clear at the start of the session last night when they said, we're trying to go to engineering and we need a blue card to get there. And I'm like, no, that's not what you were told last session, right? You were told that if you went to go see these people who run the InfoStream network, you could maybe fix the InfoStream network, and the computer in the med lab could maybe find a blue card for you, which would give you access to the engineering deck, which is where the God's Fire is. Now, having just said that out loud, that's a very complicated set of instructions, right? Just sort of not super complicated. It's not like, programming a JavaScript routine or whatever. But yeah, as BSB Care points out, they don't have a carrot to chase and they don't have a stick really pushing them at this point. They're a little bit aimless. Okay, so they're not following the plot threads that we have laid out, and that means our plot is sort of sitting in shreds. What do? We need to kind of sharpen the pencil and give them a clear idea of how to fulfill the goals that they want to fulfill. And that was one of the reasons last night I built into the tiers the express elevator to hell. Like if we had unlocked that, which admittedly was like one of the like basically the top stretch goal for last night's tip jar, but they would have found a turbo chef that takes them directly to engineering, and they would have been able to encounter God's fire in whatever form it's going to appear there, right? And essentially sort of like create a little shortcut that just drops them directly into the most active, engaging part of the plot that they're currently chasing. I think there's a lot more going on in the ship than they realize, but that's the problem. There's more going on than they realize. So we need to bring some realization, we need to bring some focus to them and help them find the plot that they want to follow. And it can be difficult, like you offer up too many options and they start to just kind of lose it. They meet too many people. They've completely forgotten about Avril's parents and the Tekka Pygmies and whatnot. They've dropped that. They're really focused on let's get this blue card, and where is the blue card? They weren't necessarily particularly helped. I felt a little rude doing it, but they said, is the key this way? And I had decided the key was this way, right? And they said, is the key in this direction or this direction? Well, if you split the difference, I can't give a yes or no on either of those, right? I have to say, no, it's not this way any more than it's this way. It's this way. And they ran out of questions. Again, it goes back to, I don't want to punish them for doing a bad job of asking questions. But they're going to have to find it. Now I have to give them a different way to figure out that the direction that they need to go. Because they've essentially decided, without any affirmative data to back it up, that they need to turn around and go back the way that they came. Which I'm not sure where I'm falling down on the job of explaining to them what's going on. I think it's one of those things where I, as the DM, puzzle it out in my head, and I understand what it is, but then I only tell them how it works once, and they need to be told multiple times, okay, this is how this goes. This is the direction that you go. You need to talk to Sabina and Sebastian, and they will set, da 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 da. And they don't feel like they have the tools to do that. They have goals, but they don't have any information that lets them formulate those goals into a plan, right? And that's really the main difference. That's the main issue that we're dealing with right now, is they know they want to get a blue card, and they know that they want to get to engineering. And even though they have a schematic, they don't have a map that says, this is the access point for engineering. This is where you put the blue card, or where do you find the blue card that will then... They're completely lost in this complex. So I think the main motivator here will be, if they get a more complete picture of what this deck looks like and what's where, then they can go, oh, okay, now we want to go there. The AIs that they have talked to have not been particularly helpful in giving them directions. So that makes them feel kind of like, well, we're just aimlessly wandering until the DM throws an encounter at us, right? So, yeah, you definitely have to balance letting them figure it out and then just telling them what needs to happen. They don't have enough information. I don't think they feel like they have enough information to figure out how they want to achieve what they want to achieve. And I, as the DM, am trying to let them tell me how they want to achieve what they're trying to achieve, right? I also think we could probably benefit from taking a pause in the step-by-step action. Okay, you ended at this corridor. You are now at this corridor. You take you hide in this room, and then these robots come out. Right between sessions, it would be worthwhile to, as we've talked about before, stop and just have a little discussion of like, okay, what do you know, and is there anything based on what you know that could help provide you with a plan, could give you some insight, right? We could activate the owl. They have definitely forgot about that. Um, that could certainly, it feels a little bit of the DM clue bat, like literally comes to life and starts leading them by the nose to wherever they want to go. But there might be more deft ways of handling that. So that's, yeah, it is some of the same pitfalls that we ran into with the mystery in terms of they know they want to solve the mystery, but they don't know who to talk to or how to do it. Um, I wonder, I'm trying to identify what on the player side of things contributes to that. I think, I think again it kind of comes back to like it's a very casual kind of game, and they want to have role playing and have fun, and it's not super motivated of, okay, here's this mystery and here's how we're going to solve it, right? They don't feel like they have the tools to do it. Um, yeah, note taking isn't one of their strong suits, which is is fine, but that means, as Wraith 42 points out, like I need to give them some handouts and things that helps them get to that realization. I think the other part of it too is anytime that you're facing this sort of, the players lack focus, they don't seem to know, they have questions about what's going on, they don't have a clear understanding of what the given circumstances are. Anytime you're faced with this type of situation, it is a prime opportunity to introduce an NPC who can act as a clarifying element, right? And honestly, like if they go through that next red door, Sebastian and Sabina are in there, and then they have an interaction with those AIs, which could shed light on a bunch of this stuff, right? Um, and I did feel a little regret at the fact that I didn't have an AI in the chief of security's desk, right? They've encountered the desk people before, and I think that that's a fun and interesting little bit that we've created together. And so to pass up on it and go, no, there's not one in this room, was a missed opportunity. It's certainly plausible that it would go that way, and it's understandable why it might go that way, but in terms of the issues that we're coping with, where we've lost kind of like what our main plot thread is, and they don't have a plan to implement what they want to achieve, then when you give them an NPC, you can start answering questions, holes in their knowledge that they don't get, right? So, Wraith 42 says, at some point an AI might even spit out an NPC floating avatar, like the classic little floating anti-grav drone that talks to the party and that they can't get rid of. Yeah, so they have one of those. They've forgotten about it. They don't know what it does. They have an owl, that's the floating thing that's supposed to do that, right? And it doesn't have a battery in it, so it hasn't been activated, and they don't have anything to. They put it in their bag and forgotten about it. They found it 3 sessions ago, and it's one of our dormant plot threads that I need to put on the board. But they literally have like a little clue bat that they could activate. And my reluctance to just have the things kind of whir to life is that it feels a little Deus Ex Demonica, right? I might have to copyright that term. Deus Ex Demonica, the GM from the machine. God from the GM. So that's I think it's a tool that's available, but I think there's a better way of handling it. Now, the good news is, like literally right around the corner or through the next door or whatever you want to call it, there's an opportunity to either find one of the AIs or stumble into the library and get more information, get detailed schematics of the ship, etc. So those opportunities are there. I think if they could get a scan of what the ship is supposed to look like, I don't think it would necessarily kill the plot, because our plot is not about escaping the ship right now. Our plot is about finding the God's fire. And what does it mean to find it and harness it and learn what, how it can be used, right? BSB Care says, just because it doesn't have a battery doesn't mean you can't activate it. You could activate it when it gets close to one of the AIs. Yeah, I mean, they don't necessarily know that it doesn't have a battery, right? I just said that it has an empty slot that's shaped like one of these things. They still haven't put that together. But maybe that's a spare battery compartment. Maybe that's the extra battery compartment. Yeah, maybe it's charging up on its own, or it was dormant for some reason, or it needed a wireless signal to wake it up and it hasn't received the right wireless call. Like, there's any number of reasons I could wake it up. From a metagame perspective, it feels like the DM slapping the players in the face with, well, you guys are idiots, so now I need to turn this thing on so that you guys understand. And that's my reluctance in making that thing just suddenly spring to life. There are certainly opportunities that we can create where it would spring to life in a way that feels integrated with the rest of the plot and doesn't feel like it's just the DM going, wham, we're lost. Guess what? I'm going to get us back on course, right? So yeah, it could accumulate enough God's fire to suddenly turn on. Maybe it bonds with Ava. That would be interesting. There's a number of different. It is definitely an opportunity that's out there to get things back on track. There are also things in the module that we can just inject that make them feel like, okay, we walk. What's the next room? A library. Oh, perfect. Well, now instead of feeling like, okay, the DM is intruding on us with this convenient NPC that we stupidly forgot about, if they walk into the library, it's player-directed information mining rather than DM-directed information delivery. If that, and that's the key difference to me, is when the players are mining the information from you, it's a lot more satisfying experience rather than when you are just delivering the information to them. Then it feels like they're receiving marching orders, right? So that's Thomas W. DeYoung. Welcome aboard. We're about to wrap up the stream, to be honest. So that's a big issue that really came to light this particular session. I felt like they were struggling, and I need to address it in the next session. Give them some focus and give them some tools so that they can formulate a plan that they want to execute rather than just sort of wandering down these all seemingly like similar corridors. And some of that is their playstyle too, right? If they were a much more like note-taking, like we're worried about getting lost, let's make a map, let's keep track of what areas we've been in and things like that, it might be a different, it would play out differently. But that's not their style. It's a lot more casual, and therefore, which doesn't mean it's less fun or they're not playing, right? It's just that's their style. So it's a lot more casual. So let's meet them on their terms and give them the tools to help them succeed their way, rather than punishing them for not playing the way that I want to play. That kind of ties up our whole discussion here in terms of tactical combat and the plot and all that kind of stuff, right? So, Wraith42 says, I think in the case of super high-tech adventures, some Deus Ex Machina is an oft-used trope for a reason, one that makes sense, just like when tech-based people enter in a world of magic, they need some sort of guide. Yeah, and I'm okay with there being some sort of guide who comes about in an organic fashion. Somehow they haven't even figured out like what batteries are yet. Maybe we're getting. I think with the introduction of the tech tree and some of those items, we're now getting closer to them starting to create their own tools, right? But we'll see. It was interesting in that they also don't understand what these technological items are and how they might help them. You found this suit of padded armor, but it's just padded armor and they don't know how to get into it and they don't know what it does. It does turn on a force field at some point. Well, that's cool. So I think if we really what it comes down to is everything is so murky at this point that they don't understand the risks and rewards that are on the table and they don't feel like they have the tools to pursue any of the rewards or to mitigate any of the risks. And I think if we get them into the library or get them into a conversation that can demonstrate kind of what the potential of the ship is, they'll be much more engaged and excited about taking advantage of the situation. So, um, yeah, the guide, enables the hero's journey, absolutely. And I think part of this is my fault. Like when the, I don't know. I feel like I could be more specific on giving them directions on how to navigate the ship is what I'm getting at. But Angelica, the MedLab AI, was certainly, I thought, fairly clear about go to the ship's core and talk to these, go to the core of the ship and go talk to these people. And they mostly did that, but then they encountered some resistance, and they didn't play very tactically to prevent that. That's fine. It's a lesson learned. Um, I don't think it's been fine to kind of like chum it out there and see what they do with it, right? We're now at a point in the adventure where they haven't really grabbed onto anything meaningful and they haven't formed a coherent plan out of any of the pieces that they have before them. So now it's time to kind of draw those things together and start making it more explicit. If they literally just had sort of like a quick, if there was some sort of video primer of welcome to the ship, your new life aboard, if there were some sort of like introduction video, like a welcome video that was created for the colonists, I think that would help them like have an idea of like, oh wow, well there's a terraforming machine on here, da 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 da, right? Some of the mysteries they've just plain and straight up ignored. So that's always classic. Yeah, as BSB here points out, I think the library is going to be our big opportunity to do an enormous info dump and help them like get materials and get handouts that will actually help them form a plan and create a strategy. So yeah, the Jurassic Park ride with the cartoon narrator and whatnot. That honestly is not there in that movie so much to give the main characters any sort of motivation or deep insight. It's more for us to understand, like it's more to justify the premise, right? And also justify the payoff of this is how the dinosaurs are reproducing. But it's not, I don't think the cartoon in that particular movie is designed to help lead them through the park or help them accomplish what they need to accomplish. But there's definitely like it's the same idea, right? Like having that little cartoon, that intro cartoon, will help our party tremendously. So, yeah, that's where we're at. So I feel like our plot is shredded right now, and we need to kind of chew those bits back over and recreate some sort of through line or series of facts that they now understand and can deal with. And I think we're at a point, and we'll talk more about this on Tuesday, where let's lay down a bunch of concrete information about the ship so that they understand what's going on and how to navigate the place and what's happening. So, all right, that's our time today. Thank you so much to everyone who joined me. I know this mouse doesn't do anything over here. Yeah, let's make a shredded plot sandwich. So thanks to everyone joining me. Thanks for tuning in last night and your donations and whatnot. I will be back in the studio with Dom on Tuesday, unless something unusual happens, and then we'll be back on Wednesday night. So that's what's going on there. Yeah, and like I said, I gotta get cleaned up for my callback. This is not a callback phase. So that's the buzz. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. Thanks to BSB Care for modding today, and we had some great discussion. And I think next session is going to have some next prep session. We'll have some kind of meat that we need to like kind of like lay down, and we'll solidify some things. So that will be a worthwhile. Um, I think it'll be a worthwhile chat on Tuesday in terms of like let's get a bunch of facts out there and how do we want to present them. So those are all good things. Thanks so much for all of your well wishes for our dog. It sounds like he's in pretty good shape. He'll I think Lindsay's going to go pick him up here in 2 hours or so. So that's great. Yeah, I'm very relieved that we knew that he had some dental problems, but we didn't know how severe they were. And the people at the pet store were like, "Oh, he's got 3 really bad teeth," and so we thought he was going to lose 3 teeth, but they only ended up taking 1 out, and the other ones were fine. And he did not have as big a problems as we had feared. So that's good news on that front. So it's been a nerve-wracking morning, but I think we're over the hump on that one. So, all right, thanks everyone. Until next time, let's dungeon. I'm not even gonna. It's Dom's problem now. It's not mine. Hey, tune in for Never Tell Me the Odds tonight. Wild cards tomorrow night. Sunday, it's part 2 of the Evil Dead 2. Tempting Fate with a special guests, Megan Caves Callerman and Havana Mahoney sitting in with Rick Budd and Gina DeVivo and Sam DeLev and the rest of the fine crew there at Tempting Fate. So tune in for that. Until next time, I will see you on Tuesday. I'm Tom Hull. We'll catch you on the tweeters.